Quick message before we get into this. My original video was claimed by YouTube's algorithm on behalf of Bandai, and it could take them up to a month to decide to release it, so I've tried animating the clips running across the screen at random directions to see if that'll get past the algorithm. If you'd like to see it without that, please check out the video on either Odysee or Rumble. Links will be in the description below. Thank you. A lot of people online are admonishing Netflix's live-action remake of Cowboy Bebop, and for good reason. The dialogue is stale, the characters are unlikable, and the aesthetic may be similar, but everything else has changed so much that it's unrecognizable. But what exactly did they get wrong? I'm going to compare the first episode of the original anime, Asteroid Blues, to the parts of Netflix's first episode that are not only derivative but just poor copies of it. Mostly, I'm going to focus on the smaller changes I noticed that lead to larger issues overall. Also, I'm not going to do a full recap here, but I do think it's important for you to at least have seen the original anime's first episode to keep up with my comparison. So, stop here and go ahead and watch the original if you don't want spoilers. But don't bother with the new one, let me suffer for you. A quick recap of the original is that a couple of grown-up slum kids steal all of the new drug known as Red Eye from a criminal organization and hope to sell it off for enough money to make it out of their shithole asteroid and move to Mars where they can start a new life. Unfortunately, the criminal syndicate catch up with them as they are making a deal in a bar, and the two thieves catch a bounty for shooting up the place. This is where our anti-hero bounty hunters come in and try to nab the boyfriend for just enough money to fill their gas tanks and their stomachs. Eventually, the three groups begin to clash with one another while the slum rats attempt to make their escape, only to run into a police blockade where they make their inglorious and short-lived final stand. Many elements are similar, but the differences are destructive to the story and leave little to no room for allegory or moral lessons. One of these subtle changes that has a larger impact on the character's motivation is that of Katarina no longer being a slum kid who has never made it out of New Tijuana. In the new Netflix crap, she's a runaway rich kid who is essentially slumming it to upset her controlling and powerful father. This may seem minute, but it shits all over one of the themes of the original. How those who grew up in the slums are willing to push themselves and those they love just for the chance to leave and live the high life. How their self-destructive warpath is a one-way street that leads to either death or glory. It isn't until their backs are up against the wall and an unstoppable force is blocking their progress that Katarina finally realizes her dream wound up being a nightmare of her own making, built on the corpses of the men killed in their conquest and on the suffering of her lover. But in the end, she has to pay the ultimate price, betraying the man closest to her before an unceremonious death. Additionally, in the original, Katarina is much more involved in the crime right from the get. As soon as the syndicate cronies shoot up the bar, she pulls out a gun, fires back, and even kills a goon without remorse. Unlike in the Netflix crap, this shows us that she is much more invested in their crime and is willing to go all the way to escape New TJ. Another not-so-subtle difference is that Faye just shows up looking to take Katarina back to her father. She doesn't get introduced for a few more episodes in the original because they knew that she would need to do more than just show up, put a gun to the back of Spike's head, and then piss and moan while being held captive to become a part of the team. And holy shit, if Faye isn't the most annoying person that I have ever seen in any show ever. Real Faye was never meant to be a likable character. She was supposed to be a deconstruction of the femme fatale, and that she was attempting to manipulate and cheat two of the most jaded people in the galaxy, and because of that, her efforts always fell flat. However, when learning of her backstory, and how she was used not only by the medical industry to squeeze every last dime out of her future earnings, but how she was also used by the very doctors who were supposed to take care of her and help her start her new life, you can gain some sympathy for her, or at least understand why she's become so broken and narcissistic. She treats others the way she was treated after being brought back into the world. The strong take from the weak and feeble, and you are either a user or the used. Netflix's Faye is just an annoying cunt. Like, seriously, that's her only real character trait. Her voice is grating, her attitude is repugnant, and I just plain don't like her. Rather than trying to manipulate her captors into releasing her, she just bitches and moans, and I can't fucking stand it. Fuck the new Faye and fuck those writers for wrecking one of the most important themes just to give her an excuse to show up in episode 1. Yet another small but damning change is how Spike has to explicitly state that they are trying to avoid the Syndicate. In the original, we didn't need to have Spike and Vicious's relationship spelled out in any other way than sepia-toned flashbacks with little to no context. The audience was supposed to be able to put the pieces together and determine Spike's past on her own. But now, Netflix doesn't have any faith in the viewer's intelligence. They have to tell us in the first episode not only who Vicious is, but that he and Spike are rivals, and that Spike is assumed to be dead by the Syndicate, which is particularly disturbing news for Vicious when he finds out he's alive. Part of the enjoyment in many shows is having to finish a puzzle made by the creators when they only give us a few pieces and a handful of clues as to what the full picture should be. All of the mystery will be lost in Netflix's crap when they move all of this to the surface and spell it out to the sheep that the show was made for. Yet another sign of the creatively bankrupt showrunners and executives and exactly how they think of you as merely a consumer. Less of a specific issue, but more of an overall shift in tone, is how every other line has to end with a cheap joke that falls flat. Many of these made me visibly cringe, or at least roll my eyes so hard that I could see my own brain damage. Spike in particular has to crack a smirk after every line read. It may be a small thing, but it really got on my nerves quickly and turned me off from ever getting attached to the character. How can I take him seriously if he doesn't take his own lines seriously? The original had a few jokes thrown in here and there, especially once Ed gets involved, but it wasn't at the constant rate of this Netflix crap. This feels like a bad humor buddy cop show wearing the skin of Cowboy Bebop like Buffalo Bill, staring into the mirror saying, "Would you watch me? I'd watch me so hard." A different allegory that I found in the original, and it may just be me, but there was a story about addiction and how it affects relationships. The original showed how the non-addict in the relationship will often ignore or obfuscate the addiction, often believing that their love and care will one day be enough to fix the addict and fill that hole in their heart that they are filling with the drug, without ever having to face the reality that they will always be playing second fiddle to the monkey on their partner's back. How being complicit in someone else's addiction will damage you just as much as you allow them to damage themselves, and whatever dark hole you allow them to fall into, you may wind up in yourself. There's even a moment when she realizes that the man she loves has deep issues when he yells at her for losing a few vials on the ground. She is struck for a moment, like a deer in the headlights. However, like most addicts' accomplices, she brushes off the outburst thinking it was a one-time deal and will not happen again. He wasn't in his right mind. He just needs more help, just a little deeper before we get out of here, and I can begin to help him. And it isn't until she witnesses him spiral to rock bottom that she gives up and stops him from being able to hurt anyone else. The closest we get to that being in the Netflix crap is where she shakes her head at Asimov as he's about to test the red eye out while standing in the back of a bar. Which, by the way, is a really stupid place to do a major drug deal. At least the original had it happen in the back room, and there was code words and all sorts of other shit to make it happen. In conclusion, this is just another bad reboot made by creatively bankrupt corporate stooges who are willing to commit cultural vandalism in order to push out another product so the normie sheep can have more content to fill their time while they keep shelling out more dough for more shit content. Streaming services were once seen as the alternative to cable, a place where we hoped creativity would be encouraged, and the corporate overlords would keep their noses out of it so long as the money kept coming in. But greed and ideology have taken over, and the creatives have been pushed out for either yes-men or those who are only interested in purveying their woke idolatry. Now all we have is standard corporate cable or corporate cable on demand. Live-action anime remakes are similar to live-action video game movies in that they rarely work out, and only if great care is taken by the creators. The mediums are almost incompatible with each other. Most of what works in anime cannot work in live-action. The ability for a creator to display exactly what is in their imagination without having to worry about something being physically possible, all of this loses its wonder when it's crappily copied. Especially when the copier has no investment in making the product match the original standards, and is only in it for the money. There's no love taken in the use of the original characters. They were once a ragtag group of jaded and broken individuals with their own unique flaws and strengths. They're now just unlikable, corny, and poor facsimiles of something greater. Spike is now just a smarmy asshat, no longer an aloof and depressive thrill-seeker just looking for the next adrenaline high to occupy his mind. Jet Black is no longer a gruff-and-tumbled, jaded ex-cop who lost his faith in the justice system when the bureaucracy kept getting in the way of him nabbing the bad guy, so he decided to go off and cut out the middleman. Faye is no longer the manipulative femme fatale just trying to score big and pay off her debts without any concern for who she hurts along the way. Now she's just an annoying, overbearing, cocky attention whore. Did I mention that I fucking hate her? The writing is probably the most abysmal thing to appear in this travesty. The dialogue is predominantly poorly timed one-liners that land about as well as an old lady on a bathroom floor. The real crime is that they could have just used the original scripts, and it would have been closer to acceptable, if not unnecessary. Instead, the writers decided to chop up several episodes, mix them together, and pad it all out with some shit jokes and unconvincing exposition that's supposed to give these characters their own motivation. In the original, needing the constant cash flow from the bounties to keep the ship running was enough motivation. Why does Jet now have to get some rabbit doll for his daughter? Also, great job Netflix in making another black man an absentee father. While I love the idea of seeing these companies slowly crash and burn under the weight of their own greed and poor choices, I'd really prefer they didn't crap all over the IPs that I grew up with, and then attack the fandoms that I belong to, labeling us as bigots for calling you out on your blatant destruction of a piece of art. A piece of art that has impacted thousands of people and touched our hearts and minds. One that will live within us for the rest of our lives and perhaps beyond. But no, we're bigots for not congratulating you for taking a shit on something we love. Take my advice. Don't watch the Netflix adaptation of Cowboy Bebop. Just go watch the original and appreciate a true form of art, made by a group of creators who thought better of you as an audience and sought to make something that would entertain generations to come, and not just occupy the current consumer's mind long enough for their subscription payment to re-up. I truly hope you guys enjoyed my criticism, but as of this moment, I'm not planning on critiquing any of the problems in the later episodes of Netflix's Cowboy Bebop. Honestly, I'd be perfectly content in leaving the rest of the show unwatched. However, if you'd like to see more of this, please let me know down in the comments below. Give me a like on this video, and subscribe to see when the next one appears. Seriously, it wouldn't take many of you to convince me. I am willing to suffer for your entertainment. Have a wonderful day, ladies and gentlemen, and never be afraid to speak your mind.